I was giving a reading in Petersburg to a room full of intellectuals, literary critics, established writers, people who prided themselves on their moral sophistication. And I read them a passage from Brothers Karamazov where Dmitri talks about the Karamazov nature, about how a man can contain the most degrading lust alongside the most sublime love, how beauty appears in Sodom and in the Madonna, how the same heart holds both. And I watched their faces, the discomfort, the polite nodding that really meant they thought I was exaggerating for dramatic effect. They believed they had chosen their side. Good people on one side, evil people on the other. And they had chosen good. What I was describing, this war inside a single soul, they could not recognize in themselves, could not admit existed in them. And that refusal, that comfortable certainty about which side they stood on, that was the most dangerous thing in the room that night. I'm going to tell you today about something I discovered in Siberia and confirmed in every character I ever created. That the line between good and evil does not run between people. It runs through every human heart. That you are not simply good or simply bad but contain both capacities fully formed. And that the war between them, the genuine daily battle, never ends until you die. This is what I called the Karamazov nature. And if you think you have resolved this war, if you believe you are simply on the side of good, you are the person most at risk. Because the capacity you deny is the capacity you cannot watch. And what you cannot watch will eventually control you. Let me start with where I learned this. In Siberian prison I expected to find men who were fundamentally different from me. I was there for political crimes, for reading banned books, for thinking dangerous thoughts. Noble reasons, I told myself. The other prisoners were there for murder, for theft, for violence, criminal reasons, evil reasons. And I expected that this would create a clear line between us. That I would be able to see, living among them for 4 years, what made an evil person evil. What fundamental difference in character or soul separated the murderer from the innocent man. And what I discovered instead was far more disturbing. I discovered that there was no such difference. That the men who had committed terrible crimes were not fundamentally different from me. That given the right circumstances, the right pressures, the right moment of weakness or rage or desperation, I could have done what they had done. And they, given different circumstances, could have lived my life. There was a prisoner I will call Nikolai. He had killed a man in a tavern fight. Stabbed him repeatedly over an insult to his sister's honor. And when he told me this story he wept. Not from regret about the killing itself, but from remembering his sister. From the love he had felt for her. From the protective instinct that had driven the murder. And I realized watching him that the murder had come from love. Twisted love. Destructive love. But love nonetheless. The same capacity for devotion that could have made him a good father or loyal friend had, under different circumstances, made him a killer. He was not evil wearing the mask of good. He was both. Genuinely both. The love was real. The violence was real. And they existed in the same person without contradiction. This is what people cannot accept. We want to believe that good people do good things and bad people do bad things. That character is consistent. That someone who loves deeply cannot also hate deeply. That someone capable of great kindness cannot also be capable of great cruelty. But this is a comfortable lie. The truth is that the same passion that drives devotion also drives destruction. The same intensity that creates beauty also creates horror. The same depth of feeling that makes someone capable of sacrificial love also makes them capable of murderous rage. These are not opposites. They are the same capacity pointed in different directions. I created the Karamazov family to show this. 3 brothers. Dmitri, Ivan, Alyosha. And each one contains both good and evil but in different proportions and different forms. Dmitri is the most obvious. He is passionate, sensual, capable of terrible things. He beats his father. Threatens to kill him. Pursues a woman with an intensity that borders on violence. And yet he is also capable of the most genuine remorse. The most sincere desire for redemption. The most honest confrontation with his own darkness. He knows what he is. Knows the Karamazov nature runs in him. Knows that he contains both the capacity for degradation and the capacity for nobility. And this knowledge, this honest confrontation with his own dual nature, is what makes his struggle genuine. Ivan is different. Ivan is intellectual, rational. He constructs elaborate philosophical frameworks, and he believes these frameworks protect him from the Karamazov nature. He thinks that by understanding evil intellectually he has transcended it personally, that by analyzing the problem of suffering and the existence of God and the nature of morality he has resolved the war inside himself. But he is wrong. The Karamazov nature exists in him just as strongly as in Dmitri. He simply refuses to see it, denies it, intellectualizes it away. And because he denies it, because he will not look at it directly, it operates in him unconsciously. His brilliant mind becomes a weapon. His philosophical rebellion becomes a justification for evil. His famous statement that if God does not exist then everything is permitted, this is not just philosophy. It is permission he is giving himself. Permission he does not consciously acknowledge but that his darker self hears clearly. An Alyosha, gentle Alyosha, the one who seems purely good, who enters a monastery, who loves everyone, who forgives everything. Even he contains the Karamazov nature. I made sure of that. Because if Alyosha were purely good, simply angelic by nature, then his goodness would mean nothing. It would just be his character. No struggle. No choice. No virtue. What makes Alyosha's goodness real is that he contains the same capacity for darkness that his brothers have. The same sensuousness. The same potential for violence. The same depth of passion that could destroy or redeem. But Alyosha has looked at this darkness in himself, has acknowledged it, has made a conscious daily choice to channel it toward love rather than destruction. His goodness is not the absence of darkness. It is the daily victory over darkness. And that is the only kind of goodness worth respecting. Do you understand what I am saying? I'm not talking about people who have bad days. I'm not talking about good people who occasionally make mistakes. I'm talking about something more fundamental. About a genuine capacity for evil that exists in every person. Not potential evil. Not theoretical evil. Real evil. The same capacity that allowed Nikolai to kill a man is in you. The same capacity that allowed guards in Siberia to torture prisoners for entertainment is in you. The same capacity that allowed Ivan to create philosophical justifications for murder is in you. You contain it. Fully. And if you think you do not, you are dangerously wrong. Let me tell you about my son Alexei. He died when he was 3 years old. Epileptic seizure. The same disease I carried. The disease I may have passed to him. And I watched him die in my arms. This tiny perfect child. Innocent. Pure. And the rage that rose in me in that moment was not noble rage. Not righteous anger at an unjust universe. It was something darker. A genuine hatred. Not metaphorical hatred. Real hatred. I hated God. I hated the world. I hated every person who still had their child while mine was dead. And if I could have destroyed everything in that moment, if I could have burned the world down out of sheer rage at the injustice of his death, I would have done it. This is not exaggeration. This is not metaphor. I contained that capacity. Felt it fully. And the only thing that stopped it from manifesting was circumstance. I had no power to act on it. But the will was there. The evil was there, fully formed, waiting. And this same heart that felt that murderous rage also loved my son more deeply than I can express in words. The love was real. The rage was real. They were not contradictory. They were connected. The same depth of love that made losing him unbearable also made the rage possible. You cannot love that deeply without also being capable of hating that deeply. You cannot care that much without being capable of destroying what threatens what you care about. This is the Karamazov nature. This is what people refuse to see in themselves. That love and hate are not opposites. They are the same intensity pointed in different directions. Now I want to address what you are probably thinking. That some people are more good than others. That while everyone may have capacity for both, the proportions matter. That a man who spends his life serving others is fundamentally different from a man who spends his life harming others. And this is true. But not in the way you think. The difference is not in capacity. It is in choice. The saint and the murderer contain the same capabilities. The difference is that the saint has fought the war inside himself consciously. Has confronted his darkness. Has chosen repeatedly to act from his better nature. while the murderer has either never confronted his darkness or has surrendered to it. But the darkness in the saint is just as real as the darkness in the murderer. The saint simply wins the war more consistently. Father Zosima and Brothers Karamazov teaches this. He is presented as holy, as genuinely good. But he was not always this way. He was a young officer, arrogant, violent. He challenged a man to a duel over a woman, was prepared to kill to preserve his honor. And the night before the duel he had a revelation. Not a mystical vision, a simple recognition, that the capacity to kill this man existed in him. That he was, in that moment, no different from any murderer. That the only difference between justified killing and murder was the story he told himself about why it was acceptable. And this recognition changed him. Not because it removed the capacity, but because it made him see it clearly. Made him understand that the war was not out there. It was inside him, and would remain inside him for the rest of his life. This is what genuine holiness looks like. Not the absence of darkness. The daily confrontation with darkness. The conscious choice made again each morning to act from love rather than from hate. Zosima remains capable of violence until the day he dies. But he watches that capacity, acknowledges it, does not give it permission to act. And this watching, this constant vigilance against his own darkness, this is what makes his goodness real. Because it is chosen. Because it is fought for. Because it is not simply his nature but his achievement. Contrast this with the character who believes himself good without struggle. The man who has never confronted his capacity for evil because he has convinced himself it does not exist in him. This man is dangerous. More dangerous than the obvious sinner. Because the obvious sinner knows what he is. Knows the war inside him. Knows he must watch himself. But the man who believes himself good does not watch himself. Does not see the war. And his unacknowledged darkness operates freely. Justifies itself, calls itself righteousness, commits evil in the name of good. This is how the worst atrocities happen. Not from people who know they are doing evil, but from people who are convinced they are doing good, who have never looked honestly at their own darkness, who believe the line between good and evil runs between themselves and others rather than through their own hearts. I watched this in Siberia. There were guards who brutalized prisoners while genuinely believing they were serving justice. They had never looked at the capacity for cruelty in themselves. Never questioned whether the pleasure they took in others' pain might be something other than righteous enforcement of discipline. They called their cruelty duty. Called their sadism justice. And because they had never confronted the darkness in themselves, because they had never acknowledged that the same capacity for cruelty exists in every human, they felt no need to watch themselves. No need to question their actions. They were good people punishing bad people. And this certainty, this refusal to see the Karamazov nature in themselves, allowed them to do things that would have been impossible if they had been honest about what they were. Let me tell you what happened one winter in the prison. It was brutally cold. The kind of cold that makes your lungs hurt when you breathe. And one of the prisoners, an old man who was too weak for the work detail, collapsed in the yard. He was dying. Obviously dying. And a guard stood over him. And I thought the guard would help him. Would at least allow us to bring him inside. But the guard did nothing. Just stood there. Watching. And when one of us moved to help, the guard stopped us. Said the old man was faking. That he was trying to avoid work. And we stood there. Watching. As the old man died. Slowly. In the snow. And the guard never wavered in his conviction that he was doing right. That he was preventing manipulation. That he was serving justice. He had no doubt. No guilt. Because he had never looked at the capacity for cruelty in himself. Had never acknowledged that his actions might be driven by something other than duty. And this certainty, this complete lack of self-examination, allowed him to watch a man die and feel righteous about it. This is what the refusal to see the Karamazov nature produces. Not the absence of evil. But evil that believes itself good. Evil that wears the mask of righteousness. Evil that never questions itself because it has defined itself as incapable of evil. And this is the most dangerous form of evil there is. Because it cannot be reasoned with. Cannot be reformed. Cannot recognize itself as anything other than good. Now I want to bring this back to you. Back to your life. back to the war inside you that you may not have acknowledged. Because if you are watching this, if the title drew you here, some part of you already knows, already senses that you contain both, already feels the tension between what you want to be and what you are capable of being. And I am telling you that this tension is not something to be resolved, not something to be eliminated. It is the human condition. It is permanent. And the only question is whether you will acknowledge it or deny it. If you acknowledge it, if you look honestly at the capacity for evil in yourself, you gain the only protection against it. The protection of self-knowledge, of vigilance, of conscious choice. You stop trusting that you will naturally do good. Stop assuming your intentions are pure. Start watching yourself, catching yourself, choosing deliberately instead of acting automatically. And this vigilance, this constant watching of your own darkness, is what makes genuine goodness possible. But if you deny it, if you insist that you are simply good, that the capacity for evil is not in you, then you become the most dangerous kind of person. The person who commits evil while believing they are doing good. The person who hurts others while maintaining their self-image as kind. The person who justifies cruelty as justice. The person who never questions themselves because they have decided they are beyond question. And this person who believes the line between good and evil runs between themselves and others rather than through their own heart, this person is capable of anything. Because they have given their darkness permission to operate by refusing to see it. Dmitri Karamazov knows what he is. Knows the darkness in him. Knows he is capable of terrible things. And this knowledge makes him struggle. Makes him fight himself constantly. Makes him question every impulse. And this struggle, this constant battle with his own darkness, is what makes his moments of genuine goodness real. When Dmitri does something kind, when he shows mercy or expresses love, it is not automatic. It is chosen. It is won. And therefore it means something. Ivan Karamazov refuses to see what he is. Refuses to acknowledge the darkness in him as anything other than intellectual exercise. And because he will not see it, will not own it, it operates without his conscious awareness. His darkness becomes his devil. Literally. In the novel, his darkness appears to him as a separate being. As something outside himself. Because he cannot integrate it. Cannot admit it as part of him. And this splitting, this refusal to own his darkness, drives him mad. Because you cannot be whole while denying half of what you are. And the half you deny does not disappear. It just operates without your knowledge or consent. This is what I learned writing Brothers Karamazov. That the only path to genuine goodness is through absolute honesty about your capacity for evil. That you must look at the darkness in yourself without flinching. Must acknowledge it fully. Must stop telling yourself comfortable stories about being fundamentally good. And only then, only after this brutal honesty, can you begin to make real choices. Can you begin to consciously direct your capacities toward love rather than destruction. Toward creation rather than violence. Toward life rather than death. I think about the guard who watched the old man die. And I think about what would have been required for him to act differently. Not better circumstances. Not more training. Not clearer rules. But honest self-examination. The ability to look at himself and ask whether the satisfaction he felt watching the old man suffer might be something other than righteous justice. Whether the capacity for cruelty might exist in him the way it exists in everyone. Whether his certainty about his own goodness might be the very thing allowing him to do evil. And if he had been capable of this self-examination, if he had been capable of acknowledging the Karamazov nature in himself, he might have helped instead of watched. Might have chosen mercy instead of cruelty. Not because he became a different person, but because he saw what he was and chose to act from his better nature instead of his worse. This is available to you. This choice. But it requires something most people will not do. It requires looking honestly at yourself. At your capacity for evil. At the things you are capable of under the right circumstances. At the ways you have already acted from darkness while calling it light. At the cruelties you have justified. At the harm you have caused while maintaining your self-image as good. This is brutal work. It requires surrendering the comfortable story about yourself. Requires admitting that you are not simply good. That you contain both capacities fully. That the war inside you is real. And will never end. But if you do this work, if you make this brutal examination, you gain something irreplaceable. You gain the ability to choose. To act consciously instead of automatically. To recognize when your darkness is operating and choose to act from your better nature instead. You gain the vigilance that makes genuine goodness possible. Because genuine goodness is not automatic. Is not your nature. Is your daily achievement against your own darkness. And this achievement, this daily victory in the war inside yourself, is the only goodness worth having. Alyosha understands this. He never pretends his goodness is automatic. Never claims to be simply good by nature. He knows the Karamazov nature runs in him. Knows the capacity for sensuality, for violence, for destruction. And he chooses, daily, hourly, sometimes moment by moment, to act from love instead. To channel the same intensity that could destroy toward creation instead. And this conscious daily choice is what makes his goodness real. What makes it genuine. What makes it worth emulating. I want to end where I began. In that reading room in Petersburg. Those intellectuals who believed they had resolved the war inside themselves. Who believed they were simply good. And I want to tell you what I wish I had said to them that night. That their certainty was their danger. That their refusal to see the Karamazov nature in themselves was the very thing that made them capable of evil. That until they could look honestly at their capacity for darkness, until they could acknowledge that the same capacity exists in them as in any murderer, they remained at risk. At risk of committing evil while believing themselves good. At risk of hurting others while maintaining their self-image as kind. At risk of becoming the guards who watch old men die in the snow while feeling righteous about it. The line between good and evil does not run between people. It runs through every human heart. And the war in that heart never ends. Never resolves. Never reaches a point where one side has finally won. The only question is whether you will acknowledge this war and fight it consciously, or deny it and allow your darkness to operate without your knowledge. That is the choice. The only choice. And everything else follows from how you answer it.